What's up, guys? Welcome back to Tidal Gardens. So about 12 months ago, we started to go towards some more T5 lighting as opposed to LED. And I went with these really inexpensive fixtures from Amazon. And I got a lot of questions as to their reliability. Do they work well? Pretty much every single month, people were requesting updates. So I figure 12 months is a pretty decent length of time to evaluate the lights. And I'll give you my overall impressions as well as go over some of the little quirks and issues that I ran into. So let's get right into it. First off, let's kind of go over these lights here. I'm not sure what the price is today, but when I first purchased these, they were about $100 for a 48-inch fixture that took 4 high-output T5s. They come with bulbs too, so they come with these yellow grow lights just for plants. Swap those guys out, and then I've replaced these bulbs with the ATI. And mostly, I like Blue Plus and Coral Plus. I've done a few different videos talking about the differences in those ATI brand bulbs. Long story short, they're all pretty good. It's a lot of personal preference. Blue Plus is probably the most popular bulb. I like the combination of Blue Plus and Coral Plus just for their aesthetics. The only other bulb that I kind of like to mess around with is their True Actinic, just because it has like the most interesting spectrum. But generally speaking, I'm not a huge fan of the aesthetics of the True Actinic. It's very dull, it's dim, and it kind of has this blah violet. It's not really my cup of tea, I guess. But anyway, back to these fixtures. They are ridiculously cheap because, like I mentioned, it's $100, but that's $100 shipped. And since I have Prime, it's shipped 2-day service. So I don't even know how they're making money on this, because even if they're, I mean, just for me with my FedEx account to ship something like that, it's going to be pretty expensive. So I don't know how they're getting it to me at this size for so cheap. But it's a pretty good deal. In addition to the 4 bulb units, I picked up a couple of 6 bulb units. Now, I could try to provide an Amazon affiliate link for those kind of interested in these, but the links themselves are kind of unreliable because I think they're just kind of swapping in any supplier that they can find. So there's always going to be some differences in these particular fixtures. So like, if I send you a link, chances are the product at the end of that link can change. It's really bizarre. So these, I believe, are Agro Bright branded, and I'm sure that they're all being made at the same factory in Shenzhen or wherever, but there's always going to be some slight differences, some slight changes in how you hang the kits, and there's not a ton of difference in quality, but if you notice, this is a 6-bulb fixture, and you can probably only see 5 bulbs working. It more or less came that way. The last bulb on the end there never really properly fired. I mean, I can go in there and wiggle it just to get it just right. It'll fire up the bulb, and then the next day I turn it on, it won't work. So, you know, Amazon, I could always have just boxed this thing right back, sent it back for a full refund or a replacement. I chose not to because I'm lazy, and what was a 6-bulb fixture now became a 5-bulb fixture. I'll just live with it. But there was only 2 of them that came this way, and we have at least 20 units here. I mean, it's not great reliability, but I mean, you're talking about like 1 bulb out of like how many hundreds of bulbs that we have here. Not too bad. I mean, ideally they would come in perfect, but guys, it's $100. The only fixture that we had a real problem with that wasn't just a loose connection on a bulb was this guy here. And I don't entirely know if I should blame this particular fixture for that failure, because the other day we had like a major power outage in this whole area. So like the entire street lost power. And in the losing power process, things went kind of crazy here. Like sometimes we blow a breaker, it's not a big deal. We kind of know what that looks like. But this one was like, you know, stuff was like sputtering, starting to stop, and then finally everything just shut down. So I think in that process, this guy lost a ballast. Because if you see here, okay, so this switch works. No, so this guy, his ballast died. But that was the only fixture. and it might not have been related to that power outage, but yeah, given how many of these lights that we have here for the full 12 months, to have only one ballast go down, it's not that bad. And also, you could, if you were very handy, I don't even know if you need to be very handy to switch out a ballast, but for the cost of these fixtures, is it worth your time to go purchase a ballast, open this thing up, rewire it, and fire it back up? Or is it just cheaper to get another one of these fixtures? Like, they're very inexpensive. I kind of wanted to go in that direction just because of how brutal the conditions here are in this greenhouse. On really chilly days, it pretty much rains in here because of the condensation of the building itself. The building is made of galvanized, and so it just gets freezing icy cold. The humidity condenses on that, and then it just drips on all my electronics. So you'll see a lot of these screws and stuff like that start to get a little rusty. All these could use a dusting. I don't know how many times we've dusted it in the last 12 months. I didn't want to go with some super high-end fixtures. We've used Radions before. We've used several other expensive LED fixtures from AI, from Reef Bright. Still do. Over time, I think that like the conditions here are just not that conducive to having expensive lighting. So I went with the completely disposable route here. Would you get better performance in a home aquarium with a much more expensive T5? I would hope so. I mean, how could you not, right? But these are basically cheaper than the bulbs that are going into the fixture. Talking just for a moment about the bulbs themselves, Bulk Resupply had an interesting video kind of covering what the degradation over time of these T5 bulbs are. When we first installed them and fired them up, I would expect to get a par of around 200 at least in the water column here. I've always heard that T5 bulbs you need to replace every 6 to 8 months because of how quickly they lose their peak power. Bulk Resupply, I think, showed that over the course of 12 months, it was only maybe like a 20% drop and not like a 50% drop that was kind of expected, or at least that was published for the longest time. So these bulbs are all about 12 months old. I haven't changed a single T5 bulb since I installed these fixtures. It's noticeably dim, so maybe in a more expensive fixture that has like the dynamic cooling and stuff like that, obviously like ATI comes to mind, you might be getting better bulb life and better performance. So far, we haven't had any just burn out, and the corals still seem to like it pretty much. So at some point soon, I will have to be replacing these bulbs just because it's gonna bother me, probably more than it's gonna bother the corals. But I can kind of tell that it doesn't have that same punchiness as when I first installed them. I can already anticipate the question as to whether I'll be using these T5 lights in the new building versus some other form of lighting. I'm really happy with the performance of these fixtures. Their reliability, it's decent. Their build quality, again, decent. When it comes down to it, the corals are going to tell you what lighting you should and should not have. And for the most part, every type of lighting will work nicely. It's just that last little bit of coloration that you can eke out of a coral. Obviously, I would love to go with LED. There's so many benefits energy-wise, bulb replacement-wise, heat-wise, especially on that scale, because there might be literally hundreds of fixtures that I'm going to need over there. And I would like them to not consume a bunch of electricity with tons of upkeep costs. Can you imagine like the amount of heat all these lights would generate if I had 100 of these fixtures? I really, really, really hope that everything I hear about some of these higher end fixtures is true, and that I can get this sort of performance and coloration out of my corals and the growth. But we will see. It's not going to be an active running system out there for months. So I have plenty of time to kind of stew on it and simmer a little bit and just kind of go over all the different options in my mind. And who knows, maybe the perfect light doesn't even exist right now and will exist by the time that I'm purchasing. Long story short, I haven't decided yet. might be wondering why even have lights in a greenhouse at all. And the original plan for the greenhouse was to utilize the natural sunlight. But it turns out that the changes in seasons really affect a lot of different types of corals. So for instance, a lot of the SPS like Acropora, like Montipora, things like that can discolor significantly, especially in the summertime, where the photo period in the summer is almost double the length of what it is in the winter. So it turns out having consistent light coverage helped a lot. But it also turned out that having less sunlight was a lot better for the corals. Wintertime is the best time for corals. And right now you're essentially seeing peak coloration because we're just coming out of a long winter. A lot of artificial lighting helps set this baseline, and any bit that you get from the natural sun, it's nice for some corals, not so nice for others. And that's why the new building is not a greenhouse at all. It's a traditional structure. Just for consistency and control, you want to have artificial lighting. Kind of stinks that I can't utilize just natural sunlight for everything, but it's going to be a mix and match. There's several corals that do very, very well out in the greenhouse despite all the fluctuations, but there's others that really need like rock solid lighting year round. And unfortunately, that can't happen in a greenhouse. All right, guys, that pretty much does it for our little chat of these T5 lighting fixtures. Hope you guys got the background information you wanted from that. I've been receiving a lot of questions about that over the last 12 months, so hopefully that covers all the bases for you. If I did miss anything, by all means, we can continue the discussion below in the comments, so leave a like, don't forget to comment, subscribe, and hit the bell. Thanks, guys. Until next time, happy reefing.